Assignment 3.3, Millie Galloway. Stress. The first part of my assignment I'm going to talk about is stress. Now, what is stress? Stress is a psychological state produced by a person's perception of the demands of the situation and their own ability to cope. I can explain this definition for you. Stress is something that we can create when we are in a situation. We often create stress when we perceive a situation in a negative way. But stress can also be positive. I will speak more about this later in the assignment. Stress, simply put, is a reaction to a perception of a situation and its demands, and our ability to cope with these demands. Stress can be split into two categories, eustress or distress. Eustress is a positive reaction to a situation, but it is still stress. However, more commonly associated with the word stress is distress. When we react negatively to a situation, it's a negative feeling. An example of eustress in sport could be a ski jumper doing a really high ski jump. The ski jump causes stress to the performer, but it turns into something positive. They like the challenge of the higher jump, and this could potentially aid their performance by allowing them to jump further. However, an example of distress is a football player, usually a defender, that has been moved into a more attacking role due to an injury, such as a shooting position. This can cause distress as it's something the performer is not usually used to, and could cause feelings of worry or being scared, making the performer stressed and unable to perform to their optimum capability, making this a negative type of stress. Stress can be split into stages, but these stages are slightly different when we experience eustress to distress, therefore I'll explain them each in turn. We'll start with eustress. The first stage is demand. Demand is the actual action of what has to be done. The example I have here is the last penalty in an important match to decide the game. The second stage is the perception of the demand, so how we view the situation. In this case, it's a positive perception, it's a challenge, something to defeat, a drive we have. Stage 3 is when our arousal level increases. This leads to eustress, in turn causing increased energy and motivation to do the skill, in our example, the penalty. And stage 4, final stage after all three stages prior have occurred in the case of eustress, it will be increased performance. However, it slightly differs for distress. Stage 1, so demand. This can stay the same as stage 1 described before. You have to kick a penalty in an important game. Stage 2, this is the perception of demand, so this is how we perceive the situation. So say in this case you aren't normally a penalty taker, therefore you don't want to take this penalty. Therefore they worry about it, potentially making the penalty taking scary and overwhelming because it's not the usual. Stage 3, arousal level increases. In stage 3, causing the participant to panic, causing a possible fight or flight response to the situation, more likely flight. Stage 4, the outcome of this panic and negative emotion would likely result in a negative performance. In this case, it is likely that you would miss the penalty. So as I've just explained, eustress leads to a positive outcome, distress generally leads to a negative outcome. So in eustress, they would hit the penalty and score, and in distress, they would likely miss. Stress can come in two different forms, internal stress and external stress. Internal stress is stress that comes from within you, for example, negative self-talk or the need for perfection. This could be if an archer goes to take a shot. They say that they cannot do it and that they will miss the target. This is internal stress. In this case, you probably will lead to the arrow missing the target. An example of external stress could be the crowd. A crowd is a good example to show how stress can affect you positively, eustress, or negatively, distress. The crowd at a rugby game could help the players, and the shouting and the noise can encourage the performer to work harder. However, the crowd could also be negatively affecting the performers, as it can add pressure to the performance, or the abuse being shouted by the opposing supporters could get into their heads, leading them to lose belief in themselves. Therefore, they perform at a decreased level. Stress can come in three forms: personal stress, occupational stress, and sport. Personal stress could be something like divorce, loss of a family member, or even just a period of moving house. Let's apply this to a sporting situation. For example, you're an Olympic hurdler. You have been training for 4 years, but a week ago, you signed the papers to get divorced. This stress can affect the hurdler as their mind will be elsewhere, as that situation is taking more of their attention than the current hurdling race, which they have trained 4 years for. This could result in the athlete having a bad performance because they aren't completely focused on the performance itself. Therefore, they are more susceptible to mistime the hurdle, and it's likely to lose them their chances of doing well in the race. Then there is occupational stress. occupational stress comes from the work environment, their job. This could be unemployment, long hours, or being underpaid. Let's say a part-time teacher is training with horse jumping, but the hours they are doing are too much. This can cause stress on the performer, leading them not to be able to perform to their full capability. The final source of stress is sport itself. For example, a swimmer knows they have the biggest competition of their career coming up, and they know they have to achieve a personal best time for them to stand a chance of winning the race. This can cause stress on the performer as they have a lot of building pressure. How stress works. Stress works in 3 different stages. There is the stressor, the stress response, and then finally the stress experience. I'll explain this through an example. Let's say you're at a crucial point in a tennis match and you're about to serve when the wind picks up. The wind is the stressor. The stress response in this situation would potentially be to serve the ball at a lower height so that the wind is less likely to affect the flight of the ball. And the stress experience is the feelings of worry and stress that would be felt when hitting the ball, and potentially the serve may not land within the court, adding more stress as the performer will have to do a second serve in the windy conditions. So, stress within sport. Stress can occur in sport. Common sources of stress in sport are listed above. There is lack of appreciation, rivalry, frustration, fatigue, managers, officials, and teammates. Okay, so maybe in a lacrosse game one of your teammates keeps giving away the ball, and the opposing team keeps scoring. Therefore, every time in lacrosse that player gets the ball, you get stressed. Or the official in a big netball team seems to be letting the opposing team get away with lots, but your team is being called up for everything and you're losing. This can cause you to be stressed, as the ball keeps getting switched to the opposing team. Finally, rivalry can cause a lot of stress, as the game is often higher profile and the atmosphere can cause a much higher amount of stress. The Manchester Derby in the Premier League football would be a prime example of when the rivalry can be quite stressful. How to control stress. There are ways to control stress. The methods for controlling stress can be split into somatic and cognitive. Somatic ways of controlling stress are relaxation, biofeedback, mindfulness, and breathing strategies. The cognitive methods are positive self-talk, negative thought stopping, mental rehearsal, and goal setting. Just to recap on these key terms, somatic means applied to the body, so in this case all the things our body can do to control stress, and cognitive refers to the mind, so this is what our mind can do to help us control stress. Let's explain a couple of methods we could use to control stress. Relaxation. A somatic method of controlling stress is relaxation. This could be stress, sleep, or going on holiday. It can take you away from the stress and allow your body to return to a normal state. Another example is biofeedback, which is where electrical sensors help you receive information about your body. You can monitor what your body is doing until it returns to a normal state. Often heart rate monitors found on watches can help you do this. Mental rehearsal is a cognitive way to control stress. It is when you envisage yourself performing and succeeding with the task at hand. Really simply, to link this to performance, a golfer may use mental rehearsal to envisage their shot and the ball going into the hole. There are some problems associated with some of these techniques, especially when we link them to sport. For example, relaxation. We cannot do this when we are in the middle of a game, possibly similar with biofeedback, as the equipment needed may not be permitted in your sport. Biofeedback equipment can also be expensive, posing another problem. Breathing strategies, although, may be useful in some sports, but swimming is an example of when you cannot use this. Mental rehearsal can be used in most instances, but for example, you are taking a last-minute corner kick and the clock is ticking down. It could be argued that there is not enough time to visualize the action and that they just have to get on with it. So some of these measures for controlling stress cannot be done live. Briefly, I'm going to talk about the general adaptation syndrome. This is the most widely accepted theory as to how our bodies react to stress. So first we get an alarm reaction, which refers to fight or flight. Then there's resistance, where many physiological functions return to normal levels. Exhaustion can then occur. Stress or stresses continue beyond the body's capacity. Sympathetic nervous system responsible for fight or flight response. On the screen are the sympathetic nervous system symptoms. Blood diverts to the muscles to provide more O2, dry mouth, increased metabolism, dilated pupils, increased muscle tension, increased adrenaline, increased heat production, increased breathing rate, and increased heart rate. Now let's dive into some of these. Blood diverts to the muscles to provide more O2. To apply this to sport, we could look at a hurdler. The blood in the body will be diverted from other parts of the body like the digestive system to the muscles in the legs such as the quadriceps and hamstrings to pull the leg up and over the hurdle. Increased heart rate and breathing rate occurs. This is a response to stress. Sometimes when you're stressed, your heart rate beats rapidly and your breathing rate increases, which is why some people look like they are panting when stressed. The increased breathing rate can aid performance if it's aerobic. For example, a marathon runner would find this beneficial along with increased heart rate, as the higher the breathing rate, the more oxygen consumed, and the higher the heart rate, the faster the oxygenated blood can get to the working muscles, therefore aiding a marathon runner, as the oxygenated blood helps them to continue running. But there is a counterpoint. When you reach a certain level of elevation of breathing rate and heart rate, it can actually harm the performance. For example, if the stress is raising your breathing rate to a level where you are unable to sufficiently inhale oxygen, less oxygen will be getting into your body. The same with heart rate. If the heart rate becomes too rapid, it does not allow the adequate time needed for the refilling of the ventricles. Increased adrenaline is so often seen in sporting situations. For example, when you hear the klaxon in a swimming race, your body responds by releasing adrenaline to raise your heart rate. This is a side effect of stress. Your body in swimming may recognize the klaxon and cause you to feel stressed. As you know, you have to react fast, causing the release of initial adrenaline. In contrast, the parasympathetic nervous system makes the muscles relax. So after exercise, the parasympathetic nervous system will work to relax the muscles after. So after a gymnastics routine, when the muscles have been tested, the parasympathetic nervous system would make the muscles relax. The digestion system will increase on the rate as the blood will be redirected back there after exercise. Your heart rate and breathing rate will also decrease when you're not exercising. You do not need the elevated levels of oxygen any longer, so that the parasympathetic nervous system will respond to this by decreasing the heart rate and breathing rate to a more normal level. To explain that more specifically, you're a boxer, you step out of the ring after your fight, you're just finishing up your cool down. The intensity of the exercise has decreased, therefore the amount of oxygen needed to be delivered to certain places will also decrease. This is all controlled by your PNS.